In this episode of the Sam Oldham podcast, I'm going to share 10 of the very best life lessons my coach, Sergey Sizhanov, taught me throughout my 21-year gymnastics career. Sergey is a massive personality and one of the very best gymnastics coaches in the world. He's now working in Ireland. He is the head of the Irish national programme, and this is his story. So, number one, this one's brilliant. So leave your head next time. When I say that to people that don't know Sergey, they might think, what the hell does that mean? Now, when I was I think I was 16, it was 2009, and at the English Championships, I had my best competition ever. I won all 7 gold medals. That meant that I won every apparatus in gymnastics, so the 6 events, the floor, the pommel horse, the rings, the vault, the parallel bars, and the high bar. I took the gold medal, and I took the gold medal in the all-around. So I was feeling pretty good about myself. And the next day, we were travelling for a training camp at Lilleshall with the Great Britain team. I'm super excited. Like I said, I'm on cloud 9. I've just won 7 out of 7 gold medals. I've never really heard of anybody else doing that in Great Britain before. And that morning, I wake up, I get my stuff ready, and I realise that I've left my gym bag at the competition arena. Now, I'm panicked straight away because I know that this is not going to go down well with Sergey. And Sergey's coming to pick me up from my house. So Sergey knocks on the door. I've got that nervous feeling, those butterflies. I open the door and I say, Sergey, I've left my gym bag at the competition arena. And he just loses it straight away. He's waving his arms in the air. And he turns around and he looks at me and he says, next time, leave your head. And I'm like, leave my head? What does leave my head mean? And what he meant was, your gym bag is your life when you're a gymnast. It's everything. Without your handguards, without the tape, your ankle supports, your wrist supports, you can't do anything. You're useless. And I had an experience when I was about 12 years old, and I went to do my first gymnastics competition in a team event for Great Britain at the under-16 four-way event. I was competing with Dan Keatings, Rhys Pearson, Rhys Beckford, these great gymnasts. Dan Keatings at the time was 16, so I was super excited. I was the youngest gymnast on the team, and we got there and our luggage went missing, so none of us had our gym bags. And we're walking to the training gym the night before the competition, and the coach, Andre, at the time, is going through each of us and saying, what routines can you do on the high bar without your handguards? And I'm thinking, this guy is a lunatic. Like, I can't do anything on the high bar without my handguards. And it took me back to that moment when Sergey was telling me that next time I should leave my head. And what he means is, you just, without your gym bag, you're useless as an athlete. And it makes so much sense, right? And he was teaching me this lesson that you have to look after it, make sure you're organized, discipline, all of these things that are super, super important, because if you turn up to an Olympic Games and you forget your gym bag, that's it. It could be game over. Your whole career is down the drain, 4 years of training. So that was lesson number 1 that Sergey taught me. And I made sure after that day that I never, ever left my gym bag anywhere. It always went with me. And when I traveled internationally on aeroplanes, my handguards were in my hand luggage. So I always kept them with me, my tape, everything that I needed. So in case I lost my luggage, I had everything with me I'd need to do a good competition. That happened on a few occasions. So I went to Hungary when I was 17 in the lead up to the Youth Olympic Games, and I competed at a competition, and I got there and my luggage never arrived. Luckily, I had everything I needed. Now, it wasn't the best because I only had 1 set of socks, 1 set of pants. I just had my leotard in my bag and I had to wear that for 3 days, which was horrible. But I competed really well and I did very well in that competition. It set me up for the Youth Olympic Games, which I went on to win a gold and a silver medal in. So, yeah, that was a really, really useful lesson that Sergey taught me from a very, very young age. Although it didn't make any sense to me at the time, I now look back in hindsight and go, oh, that's what he was teaching me. And that's translatable to anybody in any sport, right? Like, if you're a footballer, if you forget your boots, you leave your boots, you lose your boots, it's a nightmare. It's the worst thing that can happen. So making sure that you're organized, you're disciplined, and you protect your things like your life depends on it is incredibly important. So that was life lesson number 1 that Sergey taught me. Lesson number 2, you go twice as fast and as far together. And Sergey used to say this to me all the time. And he used to say this to me when we'd be setting the mats up. If you ever used to watch the old vlogs, you would see how meticulously Sergey used to prepare the mats for the high bar. And we're going to talk about that because that comes into another lesson later on. But when I would help him with it and I'd jump into the pit, and he would always want to do it by himself because he would want me to rest and save my energy, right? But I'd jump in. He's much older than me. I'd want it to be a team effort. And he'd always say, Sam, when we work as a team, we go much faster. We go quicker. And I'd be like, yeah, he's right. And in my career, I always wanted to be part of a team because Sergey's philosophy was that Team comes first, and if you do well as a team, the individual success comes second, and I believe that in gymnastics. Normally, if you have a very successful team and the team wins the gold medal or is in the top 3, you're going to have individual success as a byproduct, because you can't be a successful team without having very strong individuals. So when we went to the Junior European Championships in 2008 and we won that first gold medal as a team, we also came first and second all around. When we went 2 years later to the Junior European Championships again, we won it as a team and I won the all around. Max finished second. We won gold and silver. And that continued for a long time. We had that tradition of success, and that translates into the very highest level. So the Japanese team won the Olympic gold medal this year at the Paris Olympic Games, and Oka Shinosuke, he wins the gold medal in the all-around. So for me, team is so important, and the individual isn't greater than the team, okay? You're only as strong as your weakest member, and I always felt that way. I felt that way about the squad too. The big squad in Great Britain, our real strength, particularly between the years of, I'd say, 2008 up until 2016, was our depth, just the depth that we had. And even the youngest members that came onto the senior team and who you would potentially consider the weakest members, they were so strong that it pushed everybody. It was like a funnel that led to the top 5 guys. And for me, I remember having a conversation with one of the old national coaches, the head of the program, and one of my good friends who I grew up with, Cameron McKenzie, was taken off a squad. And I said, why did you do that? Why did you take him off? He's got so many strengths, particularly on rings and vault, where we're very weak. We don't have enough guys that you can disregard somebody that has such unique skills and is so talented, has so much potential, particularly on the apparatus where we're weak. I never understood that decision. I thought it was a poor decision. Cam went on to compete at the Commonwealth Games for South Africa. That's where he was from. That's where he was born. So he changed nationalities and competed for South Africa. But for me, I never forgot that. I felt like, wow, it felt like arrogance to me at the time. Like, we're so good that we can disregard somebody with that much talent on those areas where we're weak as a team, and it was a real learning lesson for me, and something that I really picked up on. So for me, what Sergey said was so true. You can go far, but you can go quickly by yourself, but you go much further when you work as a team. And gymnastics, when I talk to gymnasts now that come in, we just had Harry on. You've got a little support network. It's like you're an F1 team, a pit stop team. You need that team of people around you. When you're on your own and you're isolated, it's a very lonely place to be, and you miss things. You miss things in your peripheral vision. You have blind spots. You don't see them. You need other people to see them. You have to use your strengths. But towards the end of my career, when I was able to offload some of the responsibility to other people, so I could say, Sergey, can you design my training program? I say to the physio, you tell me what rehab I need to do, and I'll follow that by the letter. When I relied on my teammates to maybe watch some of my training and build me up, I didn't just isolate myself and train on my own. I trained in a group on the apparatus with other gymnasts. I did so much better, and I improved so much quicker. So lesson number 2, you go twice as fast and as far in a team. The next one is, and this one is an interesting one, because Sergey taught me this, and my granddad. A tidy job is a good job, and this comes back to Sergey putting the mats in the right places. Sergey was so meticulous with where the mats went, and that certainly rubbed off on me. So even earlier this year when I was training in the gym and I was coaching, one of the things that people always miss is on the vault in the gym in Nottingham, right? We have, it goes into a foam pit. So you build the mats up, you get a nice level for the guys to do the vault. And some of these guys doing big vaults, right? You've got Liam Drury, Sam Mustafi doing triple twists on vault. They're massive. And sometimes what can happen is you can run off the mats, and there's a big concrete wall behind the vault. And Sergey would always put a crash mat on that concrete wall, just in case that one time out of 100, somebody ran off the mats and went straight into that wall. And a lot of coaches miss that, and I would always put that mat in, and I would do that. And it was interesting, when I was coaching without Sergey in there as a bit of a safety blanket, I was starting to notice the things that I picked up from him, what I learned from him over those years where he was coaching me. And maybe I wasn't intently watching, but subconsciously it was going in. I was retaining that information, and I would always make sure the mats were perfect, set up properly, Velcros were done tight. I wouldn't leave things wonky, because when I was 14, I started training at Huntingdon. I left home, I trained at Huntingdon Olympic Gymnastics Club, and I remember one Friday morning, on a Friday at Huntingdon, we always had to do routines, and we're doing a routine, and it was just me and Cameron McKenzie in the gym, because I think the seniors were away, either at a competition or a training camp, and we're doing high bar routines, and I'm on the high bar, and I warm up, I do a straight back. Now, for some reason, I put a big thick mat in, I don't even think I put it in. I think I left it in. And I don't normally land on that mat. And it's a very high mat. There's a big drop to the floor. And I didn't move the mat to where I need it to be for my straight back dismount and where I normally typically land 9 times out of 10. I just left it where it was. And I do this straight back in the air and I come down and I see the floor and I can see, I don't know whether to land on the mat or on the floor. Where do I land? Where do I land? And I don't make a decision quick enough. And I land with my ankle half on the mat and it goes like that. And I roll my ankle and it's very painful. And I end up on crutches for 6 weeks. And that was because the mat wasn't in the right place. Now, I didn't learn my lesson the first time. I had to learn it again. So the second time, I was back training with Sergey at Loughborough. 2 years later, I'm 16. We're on the fast track. I'm landing into the pit. So the fast track at Loughborough is huge. It's massive. It's like 20 meters, 25 meters long. I'm going all the way along the fast track and then doing somersaults into the pit. And again, I leave the mat wonky. Don't quite know where to put my foot, roll my ankle. This time it's a bit more serious. So I do the ligaments in my ankle, and again, I'm out for 8 weeks. Now, Sergey's very upset this time. And I'm upset this time because I've learned my lesson now. So from that moment on, I always made sure that the mats were set up perfectly. And if Sergey was there, Sergey would do it. And if Sergey wasn't there, I'd make sure I'd do it exactly the same, because that was something that was always in my control. And getting injured those 2 times, it was something I could have done about that. So learning at that age, making sure that you control the controllables, and one of those things that you can do is making sure that you set things up is very important. And keeping things clean. You'll always see Sergey walking around the gym, picking up rubbish and putting it in the bin, and being respectful of your things, your stuff. That's one thing that I hope that I still show now, is that I always say this to Connie, even with it can be something as small as a pair of socks. When I buy a new pair, they're my socks. I look after those socks like they're the last pair of socks I'm going to have. I respect my things. I respect the gym that I train in. I respect the equipment and the effort and the work that goes into that, and how much money it costs, and all of those things mean so much to me. I only learnt that through being a young person and being a little bit reckless and careless and not really understanding these things. My first car that I got was a sponsored car, and then afterwards I went on to pay for that car and I bought it outright in the end. But that car is battered and bruised and it's chipped and it's got dents in it because it's still somewhere in my subconscious I was given that car. I didn't earn that. It wasn't my car. I've got a new car now, 12 years later. But I look after that car like it's the last car I'm going to have. So I've learned that lesson. And my granddad taught me that as well. And my granddad was in a different way. So my granddad taught me that a tidy job on a building site is a good job. Because at the end of the day, when the clients come home, after you've been working on their house, they're going to go outside and they're going to look at the site. And if the site is full of cigarette butts and rubbish, they're going to notice that. And those small details make a massive difference. So making sure that you just take 20 minutes at the end of the day to clean the concrete mixer and tidy everything up is super important, because those small details make a massive, massive difference. They leave a lasting impression. So that was lesson 3. A tidy job is a good job. And that one was a combination of Sergey and my granddad that taught me that. Lesson number 4, never sit on a cold rock. So this one used to puzzle me a lot when I was younger, and whenever we'd be outside or we'd be waiting for a plane in an airport or anything, and you'd sit outside maybe on a bench or on a concrete wall, Sergey would always say, stand up, don't sit down. The rock's going to take your energy. It will take your energy. And I used to think, what is he on about? What is he talking about? I just want to sit down. My legs are tired. I'm trying to save my energy. And Sergey meant this from a physical point of view, because the cold rock, you can get a bad back from that. And I used to think this was like hocus pocus stuff, but it's not. It's true. I've had it before. You sit down on something cold for long enough, you can feel that in your back. You get a stiff back and then you get a spasm. And one thing that used to happen a couple of times a year for me was that I would have a back spasm. And this happened in one of our vlogs. So I was on the floor training. For anyone that used to watch the old vlogs, I was doing a 1.5 punch straight front and my neck went and I couldn't move my neck. And there's a picture of me with my head over my hands like this in the training gym when Sam was filming that day. And I'm in agony with my neck and I had a neck spasm. And that caused me a lot of issues in my neck. And that was the beginning of the bulging disc I had in my neck, which has caused a lot of nerve damage. And it's gone on to give me real issues in my life for the past 5 or 6 years. So for me, it's super important that, although I thought that was an old wives' tale, I never let myself do that anymore. Or let anybody else. If they're sitting on something cold, I say, hey, stand up or put your coat down, sit on your coat. Don't get cold, because, your body in gymnastics is a temple. It really is. And when you're close to competition and you're training at such a high level when you're an athlete, your immune system is on the brink. It's on the edge all the time because you're pushing it. You're constantly redlining yourself. And the smallest thing can lead to an injury or an illness. It sets you out of training for 1 week, 2 weeks, and all of a sudden, all that training, that work that you've done is gone. It's down the drain. So for me, that lesson, never sit on a cold rock, from a physical point of view was very important. But what I take from that now in hindsight, being a 31-year-old and having been retired for 3 years and looking back, is that I almost see like a metaphorical side to that. And I see it as, if you surround yourself with negative people, that's gonna have a knock-on effect to how you think and how you view the world and your perspective. And I've noticed that myself. I think you have to surround yourself with positive energy, positive people that are on your same wavelength or are where you want to get yourself, where you want to be. So when I think about that, never sit on a cold rock now, I also think it means surround yourself with the right people and the right energy. And I've noticed that a lot in my life. And I've been that person that's been that cold rock. I've been that guy. I've been that guy that sucks the energy out of a room. I want to be the person that walks into a room and brings the energy, that lights it up, not that walks into a room and everybody wants to leave. You know, and I have been that guy many times in my career, particularly in the middle of my mid-20s when I was struggling. I was getting a little bit lost. I was depressed. I was that guy that people didn't want to hang around with. It wasn't a nice feeling. It left me being quite alone. Felt quite lonely around that time in my mid-20s. Now I want to be a positive force. I want to be the optimist. I want to look to the future. You know, I'm inclined to be optimistic now because I have a son and I want his future to look positive. That's been great for me in my perspective. But I try now to surround myself with positive people. And if there's somebody that isn't the most positive, I go, well, there's only so much of your energy that I can handle and I need to be around because it's going to rub off on me. I know it will. It's well known, right? I think a lot of people say you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So make sure that those people that you're hanging around with are people that are building you up, that are celebrating your success. I think that's one thing we don't do very well in the UK, right? We kind of have that tall poppy syndrome and we like to knock people down like guacamole really quick. Knock them down. Put them off their pedestal. Whereas maybe over in America, it's a little bit different. We've had a couple of athletes from America come on a podcast, and I think over there, they really do celebrate success. You can feel that confidence oozing out of them, you know? And so for me, yeah, make sure you surround yourself with the right people, and that's what I took from that lesson. Lesson number 5, don't eat too much ice cream. What a brilliant one this was. So there was a period of time when I was about 16, 17, I was training out of Loughborough. Sergey got really poorly. He had a really bad throat infection. And one day, just out of the blue, I was training with a guy called Max Bennett at the time. He was my training partner, and also Sam Hunter. And so we're training in Loughborough. And Sergey just starts going off on this rant about how you shouldn't eat ice cream. We're like looking at each other like, what? This is weird. What's wrong with ice cream? And he's going on for like an hour. And eventually we get to the bottom of the fact that Sergey has eaten 2 litres of clotted cream flavoured ice cream, and that's how he's ended up with his throat infection. And he's then thought, well, you can't eat ice cream because you get a throat infection. So we're laughing and he's getting angry because we're laughing. We're like, Sergey, we're not going to eat 2 litres of ice cream. We only have 1 ice cream, it's fine. And so what I've learned from that lesson of don't eat too much ice cream, what I took from that is you have to find a balance in your life. Like, the extremes of anything are not good for you. If all you eat is blueberries aren't going to be good for you. You've got to find the balance in life. And I remember in like 2019 when I was in a difficult place and one of my old teammates was in a difficult place too. And actually this was a year later and they've been going through it for a while. I had a conversation. He said one of the most scary things to me ever. And we've chatted about this on the podcast. So if you listen to the podcast with the episode with that gymnast, you'll know who I'm talking about and you'll know the conversation. And he said one thing to me that was really scary. It's one of the scariest things I think anyone's ever said to me. He said, you know what? I've just realized that everybody talks about balance in their life and just balance isn't for me. I'm not that type of person, so fuck the balance. I'm just going to go extreme. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's frightening. I was like, I'm not where you are right now, and I think you've got a bit of a way to go to get to the place where you understand that too much of anything is not good for you. And even if you are an extreme personality, and maybe you're somebody like me that has ADHD and is always searching for that dopamine hit, right? Like, you have to understand that balance is important. And even when that comes to diet, right? Like, now I aim for an 80% good diet, 20% enjoy myself and relax. When I'm training, I can't be 100% pedal to the metal all the time because it just isn't it isn't going to be sustainable. Consistency over intensity with everything that I do, and you have to find that right balance. There's a perfect equilibrium, I think, to life, and you've got to find out what that is for you. And I've taken that to both ends of the extreme. You know, I've been the perfect athlete and lived almost like a monk, and done nothing wrong. And then I've been the opposite and gone completely off the rails. And finding a place in the middle where you can toe that line, I think for me has been very, very valuable. So that lesson, don't eat too much ice cream, what that meant to me was there's a balance to things in life. You have to find that, you know, you've got to be able to switch off at times. Sport is super important, but it's not the most important thing. So you've got to realize that. At the end of the day, I still say this to people and gymnasts now, you know, when they're very stressed and they've got a big competition coming up, I say, hey, we're just doing cartwheels. It's not that important. You're not saving lives, man. Just calm down, like take it easy. And I think that was very valuable for me, learning that lesson. Actually, I haven't written this lesson down, but I remember Sergey saying to me once, I said, Sergey, I get so nervous before these competitions. I'm so nervous. And he said, Sam, don't worry, I won't shoot you. And I was like, what? And he was like, don't worry, you're not going to die, it'll be fine. And it was funny, but Sergey would say these things and they'd come out like these little like riddles that you'd have to unpackage and kind of like figure out. But he was so right. And it sounds funny and very on the nose, but actually, when you think about it, just saying that to yourself, like, it's fine, I'm not going to die, it's going to be okay. And it was super valuable for me. And I would say that to myself before these big competitions when I get super nervous. I'd say that. I always remembered that. And he came out with it so matter-of-factly. It was brilliant. I think that was before the English Championships in 2016, and I went on to win that competition. Won the gold medal in the English Championships all around that year, which was really cool, an Olympic year. So, yeah, I'm sure that a part of that was down to Sergey's words of wisdom. Yeah, don't worry, Sam, I'm not going to shoot you. Rule number 6, keep your dreams a secret. This one is good. And I never used to understand this one. Never. And I remember that when I was 15, I was getting ready to go to a competition in Australia in the January. And I just rolled my foot. I'd spoke about this on the mat, right? At Loughborough for the second time. Very frustrated. And actually, I broke my metatarsal. That's what I'd done. I was in a boot. And we're at Le Chaux, a couple of weeks to go. Big Team GB event, my first Team GB event with multi-sports. There was loads of great athletes that went out to this competition in Australia. When my dad was born there, I was super excited. I was going with my best mates. It's like the best trip that I ever went on in gymnastics. And the newspapers and the media had come to Le Chaux to interview the gymnasts and the coaches ahead of this big competition, especially with the London 2012 Olympics coming up right now. There's a lot of media attention around young kids at that point that were showing a lot of promise and talent, and the GB gymnastics team had just won that gold medal at that first Junior European Championships. You had me, Max Whitlock, Rhys Beckford and Ashley Watson. So I remember sitting next to Andre, national coach, him doing an interview and saying, Sam Oldham will be an Olympic gold medalist one day, 100%. And I sat next to him like that, and I was like, what did he just say? I'm going to be an Olympic gold medalist. And in that moment, the pressure I felt then, it was so much pressure, because I thought, wow, I had a lot of respect for this guy. He's an incredible coach. He's come from Russia and Soviet system, worked with me since I was very young. He coached me before Sergey. And in that moment, it piled all this pressure on top of me. I thought, if he's thinking that, everybody must be thinking that. And now there's this expectation on my shoulders. And that wasn't coming from me, right? He was parting his expectations of me out to the world. And maybe in some way, he knew that I was listening, and maybe he did that for a reason. They were very good at that, Sergey and Andre. And what I'd learned when Sergey used to tell me that was that I thought the most confident athletes, the most confident people, were the ones that could come out and wear their goals and their dreams on their chest and tell the press and say, yeah, I'm going to be a champion, I'm going to win. I thought that was real confidence. But actually, since I retired, and Sergey used to always say, Sam, keep your dreams quiet. Don't share them with anyone else. If you share them with anyone else, they become weaker. They're not as strong. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, surely no, if you're confident, you say it to the world. And now I've realised as an older man, as a 31-year-old, that actually there's a lot of science behind this. It's called the positive fantasy trap. And I heard somebody speak about this on the podcast. I did a little bit of research. And scientists have looked at when you share your goals and your dreams with somebody, you get the same chemical reaction that you would get as if you actually did it. And our brain it can't work out whether we did it or not, even when you tell somebody that. And I do that a lot. I overshare a lot. Because of my ADHD, I get a dopamine hit from conversation with people. So I sometimes overshare information. So let's say, for instance, I have this cool opportunity. I'll tell 2 or 3 people straight away. And I'll feel great about it. But then sometimes what happens is I lose motivation because it feels like I've already done it. My brain thinks I've done that already. Think about whether that's ever happened to you. It certainly has happened to me. And then what happens sometimes is that cool thing that you've told people about doesn't happen. It doesn't materialize, and then you feel worse about yourself. And it's a really interesting thing that, you know, it reminds me a little bit of that conversation I've had with quite a few athletes where I said to my brother once, I said, Jack, do you not 100% commit to your football because you're scared that if you commit 100%, and it doesn't work out, it's going to hurt even more. But if you don't commit 100%, you both say, yeah, but I didn't commit 100%. And he was like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting because I've watched athletes do that 100 times and I've probably done it myself. And so for me, that lesson from Sergey, keep your dreams a secret, is that, you know, you should keep them inside your head. You focus on your work. It's always better to fly under the radar. It was much easier for me when nobody was watching me, when I was a young guy coming up and I could look at all the seniors above me and work out how to beat them. As soon as the eyes were on me and everybody was watching my training, my gymnastics, trying to work out how to beat me, that was much harder. I wanted to be the dark horse that nobody was watching. So bringing that extra attention onto myself, it didn't really help. And I've watched this play out a few times. You know, I saw this in 2021 at the Tokyo Olympic Games in the pommel horse final. And it's interesting because I have a theory on this, and the athlete has actually had a chat with me, and we're hoping to get him on the podcast. And he said, no, that's not quite right, but we'll have a conversation about it when I come on. But I've seen athletes do that. And, you know, you often see Conor McGregor do it, right? Or you see boxers, or you might see Muhammad Ali. They'll say, I'm going to knock him out in the 3rd round. And I'm sure some of that's psychology. But when you're in gymnastics, you're not going head-to-head with somebody else. You don't stand in front of them. It's just you and the apparatus. And when you get up there, it's just you. So if you put all of that pressure and all eyes are on you, if you don't deliver, you don't perform, you become the guy that doesn't deliver. So for me, keeping your dreams a secret, there's a lot to that. And it's one thing I try to do now. And I have to actively try and do it because I want to share it with the people that I love. I want to say, oh, this cool thing's going to happen. But now I try and keep it to myself. And when it does happen, then tell them. All right. So yeah, that was a really important lesson, a really interesting one from Sergey. And I never used to understand it when I was younger. I thought, and actually, a lot of the time, that bravado, it was just false confidence. It wasn't real confidence. I think real confidence comes from the evidence of your work and the training that you've done. And the most confident gymnasts that go up there and perform are the ones that did all of the work. You can say, and 100% Max Whitlock is an incredibly good competitor, 100, and he always has been. But trust me, there is nobody in the world that does more pommel horse routines than him. So he goes up there with the confidence because he's done the routines. And I think the confidence comes from the evidence of the work that you put in. And you can fake it till you make it, but I think you get found out in the end. You have to be able to back up that confidence with the work that you've put in the gym when nobody's watching. So I think for me, yeah, keeping your dreams to yourself and working on them is a super important thing to do. It's, yeah, certainly a lesson I've learned. Look, there's a time, we just spoke about championing success. There's a time to do that, but you have to get it right. There's a fine line between being confident and being arrogant and cocky. And I think when you cross that line towards cockiness and arrogance, that's when maybe your blind spots come in, you miss something. Maybe you're not open to hearing other people's opinions or listening to your coach. I've certainly been that gymnast before where I think I know best. I don't want to listen to you, and I will have made mistakes and not seen things that potentially I could have avoided if I'd listened to the people around me. So that's what I took from that lesson. Number 7, this one is a big one, and anybody that's ever worked with Sergey for a significant amount of time will have heard him say this: you have no character. That is the worst thing that he could have ever have said to anybody. And it kind of makes no sense to anybody else, but if you've worked with Sergey, what he's saying is that you've got no fight, you've got no spirit, you give up easy, which is the worst thing that you can say to somebody that's hardworking. I remember one time when I was younger, Sergey was having an issue at the time with the head coach of the gym. There was a lot of friction going on. And I think Sergey had confided in my dad, and my dad was worried that Sergey was going to leave. And in a bid to try and fix that relationship, my dad had gone to talk to the head coach, and Sergey had found out that my dad had gone to talk to him. Sergey was not happy about this. And I'm about 12 years old at this time. And I come into the gym and I can tell something's wrong because his energy's off and he's not looking at me in the eye. And I stand next to him and I said, "Hi, Sergey." I go to shake his hand to start a session. He says, your dad has no character. And I was like, what? And he was like, and you have no character. And I was like, what? I've got character? What are you talking about? And I think in many ways, I spent the rest of my life and the rest of my career trying to prove to Sergey that I did have character and I was a morally sound person. I had good values. And it was a harsh lesson to learn at that age, right? And like, I'm 12. I'm not going to understand this stuff, right? And, you know, Sergey's broken down English meant that sometimes these things didn't get communicated in the best way, okay? But it was a really valuable life lesson, and I think your word is your bond, and you have to stick to that. And actually, what he was teaching me there, Sergey, it really shaped me as a man, instilled these real strong morals, principles, values. And at times, later on in my career, what happened was I upset Sergey because I chose to take the moral high ground when he thought I should have done something different. And we had a situation where, you know, there was a selection for a team and I felt that I didn't deserve it. I kind of handed my place over and Sergey went crazy. And this happened at the Youth Olympic Games in 2010 in Singapore. The parallel bars final, I finished 4th and Sergey felt that I should have won the bronze medal and I didn't feel like I did a great routine. I felt like I did my weakest routine of the competition out there. Took a big step on my dismount and I said, no. He was questioning the judging and I said, no, it's not the judges. I did a bad routine. And he didn't speak to me. He didn't speak to me for the next half an hour and I had to do the high bar. And so going into that high bar final at the Youth Olympic Games, my coach wasn't even speaking to me. Incredibly, I went on to win that gold medal with my routine, and then all of a sudden he was my best friend again. We were speaking on speaking terms. It was really interesting how Sergey instilled those morals and principles and values in me, and I really think that your word is your bond, and what people say about you when you're not around speaks volumes. And if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. It's really important, because if you don't, you become a guy that doesn't stick to his word and doesn't do the things he's going to say. So I try really hard now that if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I see it through all the way to the end. I don't always get that right, but I try my best to do it. And it's not always possible, right? But that's something that, one life lesson that was really, really valuable for me. But yeah, for anybody that ever worked with Sergey and had him say, you've got no character, I knew what he was doing with me. He could push my buttons so easily. I was so easy to manipulate and to motivate. I remember the other coach that I was speaking about there, that was head of the gym, once said, Sam, all you need to do is get you angry. Get you angry, that's it, you go out and you smash it. I don't think I was very good at regulating my emotions when I was younger. Makes a lot of sense knowing what I know now with my ADHD and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. That makes so much sense. I didn't understand myself. I had no emotional intelligence or self-awareness. I don't think you do as a 12-year-old kid either. And I was in a very interesting environment in gymnastics. But that was that lesson that I learned from Sergey. You have no character, and that was a big one. Next one, number 8, fight to the end. I found, when I was researching this, I actually found an interview that Sergey did with Sky Sports in 2017, and they said, can you describe Sam in 3 words? And he said, focused, fighter, friend. That was really nice when I read that back. You know, I must have read the interview at the time, but reading it back now was really cool. And for anybody that wants to go and listen to that, maybe enjoys this podcast, I do want to get Sergey on one day to share his story. I think that will be incredible. Maybe next year is the right time to do that. But this article is great, and there's some real pearls of wisdom in there. He talks about coaching and, you know, what makes a good coach. So definitely go and read that. You just type Sergey Sizhanov into Google and it's going to come up Sky Sports. There's a good interview with him. But that was really cool for me. You know, I always was very focused, so that makes sense. You know, people used to call me intense, very intense, and I think that was that focus and that drive. It's very self-driven. But I think that fighter thing is, I obviously, you know, I spent my life trying to prove to Sergey that I had that character. I obviously did that. And then for him to call me a friend, I mean, that's just an amazing thing, right? We have a really unique relationship. And to fight to the end is a lesson that I had to learn. And when I spoke about that Youth Olympic Games where I said, Sergey, no, I didn't do a good routine, I had another situation a few years later. It was in 2013 at the World Championships. I spoke about this on the podcast. One of my teammates, we were going neck and neck. There was 3 of us at the time. Myself, Ashley Watson, Christian Thomas. We were trying to get a high bar spot for that World Championships. It went right to the bitter end. We had to do 6 routines in total. And in the end, we kind of drew. Me and Christian drew. And the head national coach said, look, what do you want to do? We can do 1 more routine, and whoever wins gets to go. And I said, look, I think Christian deserves to go because we're drawing now, but he won the first trial. So he's actually 4-3 up. Even though I was doing better because I'd won 3 on the bounce back to back, at that point in time, I was doing the best. I was potentially the most prepared on that apparatus. He had the 4 out of the 3. Sergey was not happy with that one bit. He went absolutely ballistic. He was like, you fight to the end and never give up, ever. You do the last routine. If someone gives you an opportunity, you have to do it. And I said, yeah, but Sergey, I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. And again, we had a situation where he didn't talk to me for 2 days. He was very upset with me. And I tried to explain myself. He didn't want to listen. And then what happened at that competition, and this taught me a lot, and this was a great life lesson I learned from Christian at the time. So I went out there and I competed on floor even though I had a fractured foot. So that didn't go well because I had a fractured foot. So I did a floor routine. I got through it. Wasn't great. Went out of the floor a couple of times. And Christian went up. He did a high bar routine. He did very well. Christian said to the national coaches at the time, I should have done floor as well instead of Sam. He wasn't ready. He should have let me do floor. And I was like, whoa, I took that so personally. I was like, wait a minute. I've just been the nice guy, done the morally right thing and said Christian should go on bar. And he's just said now that I shouldn't have been competing on floor. And I think that's when I started to figure out that I was a bit naive. And actually in sport, the right thing to do is to focus on yourself and fight to the very end. Now, you have to go about that in the right way. You don't do that in a way where you're cheating or you're cutting corners or you're screwing anybody else over. But I learned that you have to fight to the very end. Because if you open that door and show a little bit of weakness, people go straight in. And that was something that it took me a long time to learn. Sergey knew that because of Sergey's career in his own gymnastics and the environment he grew up in. He grew up in a cutthroat environment. He told me stories of a Russian national team, and what would happen was if they had a young, talented gymnast that get onto the team, it's maybe 15, 16, the older senior guys who in Russia at the time, in the Soviet Union, USSR, were like celebrities because the sports stars were celebrities in Russia, in the Soviet Union. They would take these new young kids and they say, hey, come to our room. Like, it's amazing that you've got on the squad, like, come and hang out with us. And they get them drunk on purpose. And then they go and put them outside the head national coach's door, knock on the door and walk off. And that guy had never come to a national team training camp again. So that's how cutthroat it was. And that's the environment that Sergey grew up in. So I now see how the lens in which he saw the world through and how he saw sport and gymnastics. Now, it's not the same in the UK, right? But for him, it was like, you have to fight to the very end. No matter what, never show any weakness. Like, you have to. It's like your duty to do that. That was a really valuable life lesson that I learned from Sergey. And I still didn't learn that. And in 2016, when I appealed the decision for the Olympic Games, in the end, I kind of almost concealed and let other people win. Kind of got bullied in that situation. And now, I'm a strong believer that it's always the right thing to do the right thing, and you fight till the very end, no matter what. If you believe in the cause, it's super important, because otherwise, what's the point, So yeah, what an incredible life lesson Sergey was teaching me in that. Like, just amazing. Lesson number 9. This one's really cool, and this shows so much self-awareness from Sergey. I remember once I said, Sergey, would you ever want to be in charge of a national team? Would you ever want to be the head national coach of Great Britain? And he looked at me and he said, Sam, I'm a number 2, I'm not a number 1. I like to be in the gym coaching. I don't want to be leading people. I was like, whoa. Because most people's ego would tell them, come on, you could be in charge. If you did it, you'd do it better. You'd make better decisions. The team would be performing more successfully if you were in charge. But he didn't have that. He knew where he was. And I'm sure he probably learned his lesson by trying to be the number 1 maybe when he was younger. And more inexperienced. But the fact that he knew that I'm great at being a number 2. You put me in that role, I'm amazing at. And he is. What an incredible coach that guy is. He can coach anybody. And when people work with him, they might be a bit unsure of him at first, but when they train with him, they love it. Coaches love it. They want to work with him as much as possible because he's got so much time for everybody. He just wants to share his knowledge. He doesn't hide any of it. And he's such an amazing workhorse, He's the first in the gym, the last out. He'll always be there, later than anybody else. There were times where he'd come to the gym just to coach me. And, I'm sure at times that caused real issues in his relationship and his marriage, his first marriage, And I used to feel guilty about it. I used to think, wow, this guy's spending so much time with us. He'd be in the gym from 6:45 in the morning until 10:30 at night coaching adults. Just mind-boggling. He just loved it. He had such a passion for it. And I think that's the big thing that I always took away from Sergey was I love watching people do the thing that they love to do. It's such an amazing thing to see somebody that is just doing the thing because it's just pure expression and it makes them feel alive. And they're in the zone, they're in the flow state. My uncle's a drummer. Whenever I get to watch him on the odd occasion, maybe once every couple of years, and see him perform, all I see is somebody just doing the thing that they love. And it's great because he has a career out of it, but he looks so happy, so in the moment, you know, so present when he's doing that. And when I get to see somebody doing sport and you can see them just, all the external things are gone, it's just them and the apparatus. Like, that's how I feel when I'm in the zone and I'm on high bar. And it's just me and the bar. Nothing else matters. It's just pure escapism. Like, seeing somebody, when I watch Sergey coach, I could sit and watch him coach for hours, man. It's incredible. And I've talked about that story of, you know, stretching out at the end of a session and seeing the little girl and the little boy going, wow, look at that. And the little girl says, that man there, he's a wizard. I've seen him teach people how to fly. Just mind, wow. One of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. And that's the power of what an amazing coach can do for a kid. Like, that dream, like, it's their job to light that spark and keep them going and reach for the stars and teach them that anything is possible. That's what we should teach kids, right? But for some reason, when we become adults, we stop doing that. I don't know why we do that. I think we should always do that. Like, life isn't over. I used to think my life would be over after my journey. It's not. It's just the first chapter of my life. And yeah, that passion. Always, if you can, you know, the last thing I tell kids in a school is this. Everybody in this room will be good at something, right? Every boy, every girl. When you're a kid, if you don't try enough things, you might never find that thing that you love. When you find something you love, it's easy to work hard. When you work hard at it, you normally get good at it. When you get good at things, the world rewards people that are good at things. I think that's what I learned from Sergey. Just an incredible lesson. And for him to know that, you know, I'm not a number one, I'm a number two. That's what I'm good at. Just brilliant. And I see so many people that are a number one, but they're really a number two. Or they're a number 3 or a 4 and they could actually be a number 1. You know, they're a natural born leader. They can lead people. And the skills that you need to be a number 2 or number 1 are very different. They're very different skills. And we're at a point in the Olympic cycle, at the end of an Olympic cycle, a new Olympic cycle is going to start in January, where there's lots of people moving around jobs in all the Olympic sports. And this happens all of the time. And there are going to be people moving into roles. It's very important that I think if you're hiring somebody to be in a leadership position, they're the right person for the job and they have the right skills that they need. This is going to happen right now in the men's program in Great Britain. British Gymnastics are going to select a new head national coach. Paul Hall, who's been the national coach for the last 2 cycles, he's now retired. He's had an incredible career. The GB team have done very well under Paul in the last 2 Olympic cycles. They've done very well. He's managed to keep on that success. He's moved on and somebody else is going to fill that hole. So it's very important right now that British Gymnastics pick the right person because they're in a very precarious position. There's a lot of the media attention on British Gymnastics over the last few years for making bad decisions and doing the wrong thing. And so people are watching them all of the time. They've got to make sure that, you know, I was told that it's very important that you hire the right people. You have to take more time hiring, and hire slow, fire quick. So hopefully they make the right decision and put the right person in charge that's going to lead this new generation of kids and coaches that are aspiring to be at the very top. Is going to lead from the front. It's got those strong principles, morals, values, but is definitely a number 1 and not a number 2. So it's going to be interesting to see who they select for that job role. I'm really excited to see who it is and see how that plays out over the next 4 years. But knowing whether you're a number 1 or a number 2 or a 3 or a 4, or whether you just want to be an employee or maybe you want to be a manager or you want to lead people, knowing yourself, knowing who you are. And sometimes you can only find that out by trying something different and knowing, oh, that's not what I want to do. So yeah, that was just incredible insight from Sergey. What's very interesting is now that he is the head of the Irish program. So he's always said he's a number 2, but now he's gone on to be a number 1. He's not just a number 1 of the men's program, he's the head of the whole program. So I'd love to have a chat with Sergey and see when that may be changed, and he changed his mind on that. I think that's an important thing as well. Like, always be open to changing your mind. Things don't have to be rigid and set in stone. And I think probably the last one that anybody that's ever done a gymnastics session with Sergey will have heard him say 100 times or more is one more. Just one more. And one more always turns into 10 more. And one more hour. And I used to look over at the door and see my dad and Sergey and say, "Hey, Bob, 5 more minutes." And my dad would go, "Yeah, no problem, Sergey." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm shattered." But you've always got one more in the tank. And I think it comes back to that never give up, fight to the very end, like one more. And for me, that was probably what contributed largely to my success, but also to the challenges that I faced. I was always that kid that overtrained, but I always outworked everybody else. And I think without that mentality, I never would have got to where I got to. And actually, when I look back at my career, to have gone to an Olympic Games at 19 and won an Olympic medal, first medal in 100 years with those 4 teammates, what an incredible achievement. I never would have got there if I didn't have that mentality of always doing one more. If they do 10, I'll do 11. Now, it probably didn't do me a lot of good in terms of my longevity within the sport, but, you know, I feel very lucky and fortunate that I was born at a time where the Olympic Games came around in my own country just at the right time. I had a chance to get there because there was a whole generation of gymnasts before me, never had that opportunity. They didn't have the funding, they didn't have the support. And some of them I trained with and they were way more talented than I was, but they were born at the wrong time. They were the right athlete, wrong time. And so for me, yeah, that one more that Sergey always said, you've always got one more in you. You've got one more in the tank. Don't give up. You can do it. And for me, that's something that I try to do today. I always try to be the hardest worker in the room. I always say to people that whether you're playing a game of football, you're about to do a routine or a training session in the gym, there are 2 things that are always in your control: your attitude and how hard you work. The other stuff, sometimes it's, you know, you need the stars to align and it's maybe up to fate or luck or whatever it might be. But those 2 things, you can always control them. Your attitude and how hard you work. And the best athletes in the world that have the most success, they all have great attitudes and they all work harder than everybody else. So yeah, those are 10 of the very best life lessons that Sergey taught me throughout my career. I really hope that, you know, in the near future, we'll be able to get Sergey on to share his story. What an incredible life story he's got. And there's some questions that he said he'd always answer for me when I retired. Some big questions that I'd love to ask him. He's got so much still to teach me. I miss having him around, him being my mentor. I know he's doing amazing work over in Ireland. They've obviously just had Reece win that gold medal, and the Irish junior team are doing very, very well as well. So I'm hoping that next year we can maybe go over, visit. Maybe I can work alongside Sergey. That'd be really cool. A bit of a full circle moment for me. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of the podcast. We're closing in on episode 100. Thank you for all the support. Everybody that's subscribed. If you've not subscribed so far, make sure that you do that wherever you listen to the podcast, so whether that's on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing because our new episode releases every Monday. You'll get that straight into your library. Download the episodes so you can listen to them later, potentially. Listen to them in the cars. We get loads of feedback. Still send me your feedback. Sometimes it's constructive criticism, and it helps me with my interviewing techniques at times, helps me improve, try and get better. And that's one thing I'm always looking to do. I'm open to that. And so let me know your feedback. Maybe who you'd like to come on to the podcast in the next year. As we approach episode 100 and we're getting close to 2 years of doing the podcast, in year 3, are there some guests that you'd like to hear from? We've got some exciting things coming up, particularly in the next few weeks. I'm going on a trip abroad to film a podcast next week, which is very exciting. It's going to be a really cool way to kind of finish the first 2 years of our podcast journey. But yeah, thank you everybody, and I will see you very soon.